In 2014, a rural Vermont janitor, a guy who basically spent his entire life sweeping floors and fixing cars, he died with an $8 million fortune.
Yeah, which is incredible on its own.
Right. But that exact same year, you have a Harvard-educated finance executive, a man who had actually been named to, those major business magazines' 40 under 40 lists, and he went completely spectacularly bankrupt.
It is such a wild contrast.
It really is. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today, we're taking a really fascinating look at Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money. We want to unpack why investing is, arguably, the only professional field on earth where an absolute amateur can just routinely beat a certified genius.
Yeah, because it completely defies everything we are taught about how success works, right? We tend to think of money as something external, something governed by hard math, living in spreadsheets, algorithms, bank vaults, that kind of thing.
Right.
But if you look closely at the source material, the argument is that wealth actually lives right there inside the folds of the human brain. The core premise here is that doing well with money has almost nothing to do with how smart you are and, well, absolutely everything to do with how you behave.
Which brings us perfectly to the visual setup we have in the studio today for those watching. We've got this giant glowing brain constructed entirely out of $100 bills.
It is very subtle.
Oh, yeah, super subtle. But it's the perfect backdrop because we really are going to look at the psychological wiring of money. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with that paradox of the janitor and the genius because the contrast is almost unbelievable when you start looking at the detail.
It is. So the author introduces this whole concept by sharing a story from his college days. He was working as a valet at this luxury hotel in Los Angeles, and he regularly interacted with this technology executive who, by all traditional metrics, was just brilliant.
Right, like a literal genius.
Yeah. Exactly. In his 20s, this guy designed and patented a key component in Wi-Fi routers. He started and sold multiple companies. I mean, he had raw, undeniable intellect. But his behavior with that wealth was entirely unhinged.
Unhinged is definitely the word. I mean, he would literally carry around a stack of $100 bills like several inches thick just to casually show it off to people.
Usually after a few drinks, yeah.
Right. And at one point, he handed a colleague a few $1,000s in cash, told him to run down to a local jewelry store and buy a handful of $1,000 gold coins.
Yeah, and then it gets crazier.
It does. When the colleague gets back, this executive and his friends, they walk down to a dock overlooking the Pacific Ocean, and they start skipping the gold coins into the sea, skipping them like rocks just to see who's went the furthest.
It's just, it's the ultimate display of using money not as a tool for security, but as a prop for your ego. And there's another incident in the source material where this exact same executive shatters a lamp in the hotel's restaurant.
Oh, yeah, the lamp story.
All right, so the manager comes over, informs him the lamp costs $500 and needs to be replaced. And the executive just pulls a brick of cash from his pocket, peels off $5,000, hands it to the manager, and tells him to get out of his face and never insult him like that again.
He is literally using money to purchase social dominance, but as the book points out, math really doesn't care about your ego. The executive eventually went completely broke. The well just ran dry.
Yep, the money vanished.
So contrast that visceral need for dominance with the janitor, Ronald Reed. This guy was the first person in his family to graduate high school, and he only managed that by hitchhiking to campus every single day.
Wow.
Yeah. And then for 17 years, he swept floors at a JCPenney. He spent another 25 years fixing cars at a local gas station. His primary hobby, like his main way to pass the time, was chopping firewood. He lived in this tiny two-bedroom house that he bought for $12,000.
And then we get to the math of his death, which is staggering. When Ronald Reed died at age 92 in 2014, roughly 2,813,500 Americans passed away that year. Out of nearly 3 million people, fewer than 4,000 had a net worth over $8 million. Ronald Reed was one of them.
That is just wild to think about.
It is. He left $2 million to his stepkids and over $6 million to his local hospital and library. And he didn't win the lottery. He didn't, inherit a dime.
He just saved whatever small amount he could, bought blue chip stocks, and waited. He just let the mathematical reality of compounding do the heavy lifting over several decades. But compounding is incredibly unintuitive to the human brain.
Right, because we think linearly, not exponentially.
Exactly. Reed possessed the patience to sit still, which is fundamentally a behavioral trait. It's not an intellectual one.
And right around the exact same time Ronald Reed died, Richard Fuscone was in the news.
Mm.
Fuscone is that Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive we mentioned. He had the MBA, the prestigious career. He even had the early retirement in his 40s to pursue philanthropy.
A completely different world.
Totally. But Fuscone borrowed heavily to expand an 18,000 square foot mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. We were talking 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, 2 indoor pools, and a maintenance bill of $90,000 a month.
$90,000 a month just to keep the lights on. So when the 2008 financial crisis hit, all that leverage completely collapsed on him. He went bankrupt. The mansion, which literally had a see-through cover over an indoor pool so guests could dance on water, it was sold in a foreclosure auction for pennies.
Yeah. The rural janitor beat the Harvard executive because the executive lacked the psychological concept of enough.
Right.
And this completely upends how we teach finance. We teach it like it's physics. We expect clear rules and laws. You put the data into a formula, you get a predictable result.
But it's not physics.
No, it's a soft skill. It beats your psychology. I mean, think about it. In no other professional field could an amateur fundamentally outperform a heavily trained expert like that.
Right. You cannot imagine a world where Ronald Reed, the janitor, performs a heart transplant better than a Harvard-trained surgeon.
No, definitely not.
Or designs a structurally sound skyscraper better than a licensed architect. It's like trying to teach someone how to sail a boat in a hurricane by only giving them a physics textbook about wind resistance.
That's a great way to put it.
Like, the math in the textbook is perfectly accurate, right? But it tells you absolutely nothing about the sheer adrenaline-fueled panic you experience when a 20-foot wave is actively crashing over the bow of your boat. The textbook just completely ignores the human element.
And the human element is the only thing that actually matters when the storm hits. Because if you panic and sell all your investments at the absolute bottom of a market crash, all the financial modeling in the world won't save you.
So what does this all mean? If patience and basic behavioral control are really the keys to this whole thing, why is it so incredibly hard for people to just do that? Why do we constantly make these seemingly crazy, irrational choices with our money?
Well, the source material offers a really profound answer to that, actually. The author says no one is actually crazy.
Really? No.
No one. Every single financial decision a person makes, it makes complete logical sense to them in the exact moment they make it. The catch is that their logic is being filtered through this highly distorted lens of their own personal generational experience.
Okay. Like that historical example with John F. Kennedy. When he was running for president in 1960, a reporter asked him what he actually remembered from the Great Depression. And Kennedy basically admitted he had no firsthand knowledge of it at all.
Right, because his family was already incredibly wealthy.
Exactly. And their wealth actually grew during the 1930s. They moved into bigger houses. They hired more servants. He didn't genuinely learn about the devastation of the Depression until he was literally reading about it in a book at Harvard.
And reading about an economic collapse in a dorm room is fundamentally different than, watching your parents lose their entire life savings. The brain's availability heuristic essentially hardwires us to overweight visceral emotional experiences. Secondhand knowledge simply cannot compete with lived trauma.
And there's a massive 2006 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research that proves this exact mechanism on a societal level, right?
Yeah, economists dug through 50 years of data to figure out why people invest the way they do. And they found that a person's lifetime investment decisions are heavily anchored to whatever the economy was doing during their early adulthood.
Wow, 50 years of data.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what their long-term goals are or what current interest rates are. It matters what they experienced when their brain was forming its baseline understanding of how the world works.
It's like an imprint.
Exactly. Think about the practical reality of that. If you were born in 1950, you watched the stock market go essentially nowhere during your teens and 20s. It was just stagnant.
Right.
But if you were born in 1970, the market increased almost tenfold during those exact same formative years. Those two distinct groups of people are going to have completely different neurological responses to the concept of investing. One sees a stagnant trap, and the other sees an escalator to wealth.
It's the exact same dynamic with inflation, isn't it? Someone born in 1960 watched inflation completely erode the purchasing power of the dollar in their youth. They remember sitting in gas lines.
Yeah, they felt it.
But someone born in 1990 grew up in an era where inflation was functionally invisible until very, very recently. When you ask those two people to assess the risk of a bond portfolio, they are operating in entirely different realities.
It also dictates how we evaluate global labor and value.
Mm.
The author highlights this situation involving the Foxconn factory in China, the one that manufactures a lot of our electronics.
Right.
When reports of the harsh working conditions there reached the U.S., Americans were, understandably, just appalled. But a Chinese worker's nephew responded to the outcry by pointing out that his aunt had previously survived by working as a prostitute.
Oh.
Yeah. To her, working long hours in a factory was a monumental upgrade. It offered a level of physical safety and regular income that she had never experienced. Now, to be clear, we are absolutely not endorsing sweatshops or harsh conditions here. We are just impartially reporting what's in the text to show how drastically human perspectives can shift.
Right, exactly. We look at the factory and see exploitation. She looks at the factory and sees salvation. Both views are authentic reactions based on completely different starting points.
Hmm.
And even when the math is undeniably terrible, this lens of experience explains the behavior.
Like with lottery tickets.
Yes, look at lottery tickets. The lowest income households in the U.S. spend about $412 a year on lotto tickets. At the exact same time, roughly 40% of Americans couldn't easily come up with $400 in an emergency.
Which sounds completely irrational.
Right. They are taking their only safety net and blowing it on a mathematically absurd probability.
But from the outside, yeah, it looks like pure financial illiteracy. But if you step inside their lived experience, the psychological mechanism makes this tragic kind of sense.
How so?
Well, if you genuinely feel that saving is out of reach, that higher wages are systemically blocked, and you can't ever afford the security that wealthy people just take for granted, a lottery ticket ceases to be a math equation. It becomes the only tangible way to purchase a dream. You are buying a momentary feeling of hope that the current system otherwise denies you.
I mean, I hear that, but hold on, I have to challenge this premise. If my entire financial worldview, my risk tolerance, my optimism, my fears, if it's basically just a side effect of whatever year I happen to be born and whatever zip code I grew up in, doesn't that mean we are entirely tracked by our generation's biases? Like, is there any way to actually hack our own psychology, or are we just passengers?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you aren't permanently trapped, no. But escaping requires a massive dose of humility. You have to actively recognize the math of your own ignorance. Your personal experiences with money make up maybe 0.0000001% of what has actually happened in the world, but they dictate 80% of how you believe the world works.
Right.
So the hack is just recognizing that your mental model is incomplete.
And it really doesn't help that human history with modern money is incredibly short. We are so hard on ourselves for making financial mistakes, but we are essentially playing a highly complex game that human beings haven't even had time to learn yet.
This is a really vital piece of the puzzle. We assume money is ancient and, well, currency itself is. King Aliots of Lydia created the first official currency around 600 BC. But modern saving and investing, the actual tools we use today, they are historical infants.
They really are. I mean, the concept of retirement, as we understand it right now, is a brand new invention. Before World War II, the expectation was simply that you worked until you died.
Yeah, you just kept working.
There was no concept of a 30-year leisure period at the end of your life. In the 1940s, over half of all men aged 65 and older were still actively in the labor force.
And when Social Security was introduced, it was not designed as this comprehensive wealth-building tool. The very first monthly check issued to Ida Mae Fuller in 1940 was for $22.54. And pensions weren't widespread either. By 1975, only about a quarter of people aged 65 or older had any pension income to rely on.
Think about the 401k. We treat it like this eternal, fundamental pillar of the American dream. It didn't even exist until 1978. The Roth IRA was created in 1998. If it were a person, it would barely be old enough to drink.
Exactly.
Broadly accessible index funds are less than 50 years old. Massive, widespread consumer debt didn't really take off until the post-World War II economic boom. We are navigating a landscape that our own grandparents literally wouldn't recognize.
And we learn how to survive as a species through multi-generational cultural osmosis. We know how to cultivate crops, build shelters, and form communities because thousands of generations refined those skills and passed them down.
Right.
We do not have thousands of generations of muscle memory for navigating a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage or,
Yeah.
a collateralized debt obligation.
It makes me think of domesticated dogs. A dog was domesticated 10,000 years ago, but it still retains these deep, wild instincts. It will spin in circles on a soft carpet to pat down imaginary tall grass before it sleeps.
Yeah, exactly.
Human beings have had barely 20 to 50 years of experience with modern financial systems, and we arrogantly expect ourselves to be perfectly rational, perfectly acclimated actors. The anxiety you, our listener, might feel when you look at your retirement dashboard, it isn't because you're fundamentally bad at math. It's because you are an early hominid trying to pilot a spaceship.
And because we are emotional creatures playing this brand new, highly complex game, the outcomes are incredibly noisy. The world is just too complex to allow 100% of your actions to dictate 100% of your outcomes.
Yeah.
You can do everything right and still fail, or do everything wrong and succeed.
Right.
And this is where we run into the two invisible forces that warp our understanding of success: luck and risk.
They are essentially doppelgangers. The book illustrates this beautifully by looking at the early life of Bill Gates. So in 1968, Bill Gates attended Lakeside School in Seattle. Lakeside was one of the only high schools in the entire world that possessed a computer terminal.
Which is crazy for 1968.
Yeah. And it was only there because a teacher petitioned the Mothers Club to use $3,000 from a rummage sale to lease it.
The math on that head start is just staggering. Out of roughly 303 million high school-aged people in the world at that exact time, only about 300 attended Lakeside. That is a 1 in a million statistical anomaly. Gates himself has openly stated that if there had been no Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft. His brilliant effort was amplified by extreme luck.
Wait, but there is a dark side to those exact same odds. His best friend, Kent Evans.
Exactly. By Gates' own account, Kent Evans was the best student in the class. He was just as brilliant with computers, shared the exact same endless ambition, and they were actively planning their futures together. But Kent never graduated. He died in a mountaineering accident before high school ended.
Wow. And the odds of being killed on a mountain in high school are roughly 1 in a million. So you have Gates, who experienced 1 in a million luck, and his best friend, who experienced a 1 in a million risk. It is the exact same magnitude of force, just working in opposite directions.
It proves that you were just one person in a game with 7 billion other moving parts. The infinite interactions of those parts create outcomes that are totally outside of your control. We struggle with this because of a psychological phenomenon called the fundamental attribution error.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How does that play out when we evaluate famous billionaires? Like, if the line between a bold genius and a reckless failure is a millimeter thick and mostly decided by luck and risk, how on earth are you supposed to learn what works? Should we just stop studying successful people entirely?
What's fascinating here is that when we evaluate others, we want clean narratives. If Cornelius Vanderbilt expands his railroad empire by agreeing to transactions that flat out violate state laws, we look at his resulting wealth and label him a scrappy, visionary genius. When an advisor warned Vanderbilt about the law, he famously replied, "Do you suppose you can run a railroad in accordance with the statutes of New York?"
But if a judge had actually managed to enforce an injunction and shut his operations down, the exact same behavior would be written down in history books as the reckless actions of a criminal.
Precisely. John D. Rockefeller did the exact same thing, ruthlessly skirting legal boundaries, and he is praised for his business acumen.
Look at Benjamin Graham. He is literally the father of value investing. He wrote the rules on meticulous diversification, but he made his massive legacy-defining fortune because his firm purchased a huge chunk of Geico stock, which ended up breaking almost all of his own famous rules on diversification.
Or Mark Zuckerberg. He rejects Yahoo's $1 billion buyout offer early in Facebook's life, and he is hailed as a visionary with an iron will. But when Yahoo rejected Microsoft's massive buyout offer years later, the leadership at Yahoo was endlessly mocked as foolish and delusional.
Right. The outcome dictates how we judge the behavior, even when the behavior is identical.
And our egos handle this ambiguity terribly. Acknowledging the role of luck in someone else's success makes us feel jealous, so we attribute it to their skill just to justify our own position. But acknowledging the role of luck in our own success is deeply demoralizing to our pride. Conversely, when we fail, we immediately blame the dark side of risk, bad luck, bad timing. But when someone else fails, we blame their bad decisions.
It's a rigged psychological game. NYU professor Scott Galloway has a quote that cuts right through this. He says, "Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems." If you remove the invisible thumbs of extreme luck and extreme risk from the scale, human effort is generally much closer to the average. But if the extreme tails of individual billionaires are heavily distorted by luck and risk, where are we supposed to look for guidance? What is the ultimate goal here?
The author suggests the only reliable way to learn about money is to stop focusing on extreme outliers and start looking at broad, repeatable patterns.
Like the historian Frederick Lewis Allen, he intentionally spent his entire career studying the median average American instead of hyper-focusing on the extremes of society.
Right, because the patterns of the median are far more applicable to a normal life. Even Bill Gates issued a warning about this exact trap. He said, "Success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose."
Emulating extreme billionaires is dangerous because you cannot reliably emulate their luck. You can, however, emulate the broad patterns of patience, consistent saving, and behavioral control that allowed Ronald Read to amass $8 million.
This raises an important question, though, about what we're actually aiming for.
Which brings up a story from the source material that perfectly encapsulates the ultimate goal of all of this. John Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, tells a story about a party on Shelter Island. It was hosted by a wildly successful billionaire hedge fund manager. Two famous authors are at this party, Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller, who wrote the classic novel Catch-22.
I love this story.
So good. Vonnegut turns to Heller and points out that their host, the hedge fund manager, made more money in a single day than Heller had earned from his famous novel over its entire history. And Joseph Heller replies, "Yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough."
Enough. If you internalize the invisible forces of luck and risk, it fundamentally changes your relationship with that word. Acknowledging risk gives you the grace to forgive yourself when a financial decision doesn't pan out because you recognize you don't control every variable.
Right.
And acknowledging luck prevents the endless, unquenchable thirst for more because you realize that constantly moving the goalpost is a game with no mathematical endpoint.
It completely redefines the whole pursuit. Which brings me directly to you, our listener. We started this deep dive looking at the mechanics of wealth, trying to figure out why some people succeed and others fail. But the real insight here isn't a stock-picking formula. It's a fundamental shift in how you view your own life.
Yeah, exactly.
It is recognizing that you are playing a brand new historical game that human beings have barely started to comprehend. It's giving yourself permission to cut yourself some slack for the risks that blindsided you, and it's realizing that your tiny, incredibly specific sliver of personal experience actively blinds you to the realities and choices of the people around you. So I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about your day.
Let's hear it.
If true wealth isn't the actual number sitting in your bank account, but rather the psychological mastery of enough and making peace with the invisible hands of luck and risk, what is the invisible metric you are currently using to judge your own success right now? And more importantly, whose life experience actually built that metric for you?
That's a great question.
Next time you catch yourself stressing over a financial decision, remember the janitor and the genius. It's not the math that matters, it's the mind holding it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We'll see you next time.